But as for us there, we are developing to bring young people back to production. Production, especially agriculture and transformation. Because we cannot conceive in this 21st century, we continue to import almost all our food from the outside. While we have immense potential,
there are moments when a country doesn't announce change, it radiates it. That's what happened in Ouagadougou on November 18, 2025. The city felt charged, almost restless, like it knew something historic was about to begin. You saw it in the crowd. Young developers clutching laptops, drone builders hurrying through the gates, researchers whispering ideas they hadn't dared to share before. And at the center of it all stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, ready to open the 20th edition of Digital Week. But this time, it wasn't just another event. It was a statement, a declaration that Burkina Faso wasn't waiting for the future to arrive. It was preparing to build it with its own hands. From the first moments, you could tell this week would be different. Bigger, louder, more ambitious. It made everyone wonder, what exactly was Burkina Faso about to reveal? So, let's find that out. Sometimes a city wakes up differently. Not slower, not faster, just sharper. Like the air itself is paying attention. Ouagadougou had that kind of morning on November 18, 2025. People weren't strolling or drifting or wandering toward the conference center. They were moving with purpose, with a sense that something important was waiting for them inside. Even the sunlight felt a little heavier, like it wanted to witness what was coming. You could see it in the crowd, young developers holding laptops tight against their chests, as if the ideas inside were alive. Students are adjusting drone bags like they were carrying delicate birds. Researchers flipping through last-minute notes. Inventors clutching prototypes made from whatever materials they could find. Bent metal, wires, recycled plastic. The kind of creativity that's born when resources are scarce, but imagination is not. Everything about the scene felt restless, humming, and awake. And then, there was the anticipation. The waiting for that one moment everyone had come for. The entrance of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. When he finally stepped onto the stage to open the 20th edition of Digital Week, the room didn't explode into noise. It quieted, deeply, suddenly. The kind of silence that means people aren't being polite, they're listening. It wasn't the kind of silence reserved for ceremonies. It was the silence reserved for history. Traoré stood there for a second, just absorbing the energy in the room, and then he started speaking in that calm, steady tone of his. No showmanship, no unnecessary drama, just conviction. And that's what made it hit harder. When he said, artificial intelligence is no longer optional for Africa, he wasn't making a prediction. He was making a decision, a line in the sand, a new direction. You could feel something shift. The students leaned forward, the engineers straightened up. Even the government officials, usually tight and stiff in these settings, seemed to relax into the moment like they finally understood what everyone else had been feeling. It wasn't about speeches or displays. It was about a new way of thinking, and Traoré had just said it out loud for the world to hear.
Well, I think it's important because as Africa develops and evolves into the future magnet of the world, it becomes a place where we need to understand that Africa is much more than different lines on a map. It's a place where we need to stand together for people who are originally from Africa, whose ancestors are from Africa, and for people who have lived in Africa and who have contributed in Africa for hundreds of years and who wants to make a future in Africa. I think it's important for myself to attend this conference because it brings a new perspective.
Digital Week 2025 wasn't going to be a typical event, the kind that gets politely applauded and then forgotten by next Tuesday. No, this one felt different. It felt like a beginning, a crack in the old way of doing things, a doorway into something bigger, and everyone in that hall knew it. You could see it in their faces, that mix of excitement and fear and possibility that only comes when people realize the ground under their feet is about to move. And as the applause finally rose, not loud but confident, you could almost sense a collective question forming in the room. If this were only the opening moment, Then what exactly was happening inside Digital Week that made the whole continent turn its eyes toward Ouagadougou? When you finally stepped inside the halls of Digital Week, the first thing you noticed was that nothing felt organized traditionally. And strangely, that was exactly what made it feel alive. Normally, tech events look too clean, too arranged, too rehearsed. But this one? It felt like someone had opened the doors of a giant workshop and let raw creativity spill out everywhere. Ideas weren't just being presented, they were being built in real time, sometimes broken, sometimes fixed, sometimes reinvented on the spot by people who simply refused to let limitations slow them down. You heard a noise, real noise, the good kind. Keyboards clacking like drums, laughter every few seconds, heated debates that somehow ended in handshakes, the hum of machines being tested, the excitement of someone shouting, "It worked!" from across the room. It didn't feel like a conference. It felt like a rehearsal for the future, messy, unpredictable, full of energy, and absolutely impossible to ignore. In one corner, a group of young programmers huddled around a tablet showing an AI that could diagnose malaria from a photo. It wasn't polished yet. It stalled, glitched, misread a few images. But the important thing was that they built it themselves. No foreign consultant, no imported model. And therefore, every glitch didn't feel like a failure. It felt like training. Growth, proof that African tech was finally learning to stand on its own legs. A few steps away, a team of engineering students demonstrated a drone built almost completely from locally available materials. You could tell they had spent nights on this thing. The edges were rough, the wiring wasn't the prettiest, and the software sometimes froze for a second too long. But when it lifted off the ground and hovered with surprising stability, the crowd erupted. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. Built here, designed here, imagined here. Therefore, conversations immediately shifted to, how many do we need? How fast can we scale this? It was no longer about prototypes, it was about solutions. And it didn't stop there. Another room had a blockchain-based land registry system that could prevent corruption. Another corner showed a climate prediction model built by students from Bobo Dioulasso, who had never left Burkina Faso but somehow had produced work that could rival early-stage Western research. Everywhere you walked, you saw a pattern. Young people trying to solve problems they grew up with, using tools they taught themselves, in a system that was finally permitting them to imagine bigger things. What can struck you most was how seriously the youth took this. They weren't playing around with technology the way hobbyists do. They were fighting with it, wrestling with it, pushing it until it bent toward the needs of their communities. It felt less like a conference and more like a generation stepping into the light, ready to take ownership of their future. And the deeper you went into the event, the more you felt this wasn't just Burkina Faso's moment. Something bigger was forming in the background, a quiet, powerful sense that this energy didn't belong to one country alone. Which raised the next question. Was this digital wave spreading across borders? Was a new regional tech alliance taking shape without anyone explicitly announcing it?
Where young activists and entrepreneurs from around Africa and the diaspora get together to exchange ideas. They will participate in events including a business summit, cultural dialogues.
The more time you spent inside Digital Week, the harder it became to see it as just a Burkina Bay event. You could feel something bigger breathing beneath the surface, a kind of shared ambition stretching across borders. And honestly, it made sense. The Sahel has always carried the weight of the same struggles: insecurity, unemployment, brain drain, and unfair global narratives. But now, walking through the halls, you started seeing something new, the same region discovering its shared solutions. Ghana's delegation made that especially clear. They didn't walk in like guests, they walked in like collaborators. Ghana has spent years building its fintech ecosystem, experimenting with e-governance, strengthening cybersecurity frameworks, and now they are here, freely sharing ideas, comparing models, and exploring what a unified digital West Africa could look like. It was refreshing, almost strange. You don't usually see this kind of openness at African tech events. Usually it's each country in its own lane. But here, lanes didn't exist. Then Mali arrived with a team that felt more like a traveling tech battalion than a delegation. They brought young developers who had built digital health tools under pressure, in environments where resources were thin and stakes were high. You could see the hard-earned resilience in their faces. the kind that only comes from building technology not for innovation fairs, but for real survival. Their presence changed the tone of the event. It reminded everyone that the Sahel doesn't innovate because it's trendy. It innovates because it must. Niger's team added yet another layer. They presented solar-powered data infrastructure models designed for remote communities, simple, rugged, efficient systems built for villages that the global tech industry barely remembers exist. And suddenly you could see a picture forming, a region stitching itself together through technology, not diplomacy. It wasn't a formal alliance, no signed documents, no logo, no speeches about unity. The connection was more organic, born out of shared frustrations and shared dreams. Every conversation in those halls felt like part of a continental brainstorming session. How do we secure borders smarter? How do we protect data? How do we build platforms that serve our own people instead of outsiders? There was a rhythm in these exchanges, not competition, not suspicion, something closer to recognition. Like countries looking at each other and saying, you know what? We're not alone. We're all trying to break free from the same limitations. And that's where Traoré's vision quietly became clearer. He wasn't just pushing Burkina Faso forward. He was stitching a digital corridor across the Sahel, a path where Ghanaian expertise could strengthen Burkinabe ideas, where Malian innovation could spark Nigerian solutions, and where the entire region could finally start innovating from within instead of waiting for foreign tech to trickle down. It was the kind of collaboration that didn't need a treaty. It just needed a spark. And Digital Week provided exactly that. But seeing all this cooperation naturally raised a tougher, more intimate question. If the region is rising together, how exactly does Traoré plan to use AI to reshape governance inside Burkina Faso itself? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. When people talk about artificial intelligence, they usually mean gadgets, futuristic robots, or some glossy Silicon Valley dream. But Traoré didn't talk about AI like that. He talked about it like someone who had been dealing with a system full of cracks for years, slow offices, confusing paperwork, lost files, untraceable transactions, and had finally found a tool sharp enough to cut through all of it. You could feel that in every sentence he spoke, every example he gave, every demo he pointed toward. For him, AI wasn't a luxury. It was a cleaning instrument, a fixer, a purifier of things that had stayed broken for too long. Take land records, for instance. In many African countries, a simple land dispute can drag on for years because papers disappear, names get altered, or data mysteriously changes. But inside Digital Week, students demonstrated a blockchain-based land registry system. You could see the possibilities immediately. Once a record is locked in a blockchain, it can't be tampered with. No official can lose it. No middleman can quietly rewrite it. Suddenly, something that once depended on office politics could depend on math. Pure, cold, exact math. And honestly, you could feel the hope in the room when people realized how big that shift could be. Then there were the drones. Not fancy imported ones, local builds. Machines are designed for border surveillance, terrain scanning, and emergency response. You could tell Traoré liked these. You could tell he saw them as more than gadgets. He saw them as teammates. Tools that could multiply the capacity of security forces without overworking them. Tools that could watch the night skies when officers were exhausted. Tools that could track illegal movements in forests where humans can't go safely. In a region where borders often stretch far beyond the reach of manpower, drones aren't toys, they're lifelines. But the AI that seemed to excite the youth most was the predictive kind. Models that forecast health risks, rainfall shifts, disease outbreaks, and resource usage. Imagine a rural clinic knowing, weeks in advance, when malaria cases might spike. Imagine farmers receiving early rainfall alerts tailored to their exact village. Imagine ministries operating on real data instead of outdated guesswork. For the first time, governance wouldn't be reacting to problems. It would be anticipating them. And with every demo, every conversation, you felt the same question forming in people's heads. If this technology becomes part of the government's daily life, how much of the old inefficiency, corruption, and delay would survive? Maybe none. Maybe that was the point. AI wasn't just about faster systems, it was about cleaner systems. Systems that worked for citizens, not against them. But as inspiring as all this sounded, there was still a practical challenge hanging in the air. How do you build all this without the proper scientific tools, labs, and equipment? How does Burkina Faso turn ideas into actual functioning systems? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The question hanging over Digital Week wasn't small. Everyone was thinking it, even if nobody said it out loud. How do you pull off all this ambition without the right tools? You can't build AI models on slow computers. You can't train robotics engineers without robotics equipment. You can't compete globally if your scientists don't have the instruments their counterparts abroad take for granted. Talent isn't the issue. Africa has that in abundance. The issue is the environment where that talent is supposed to grow. And then Traoré answered the question in the most unexpected way. Not with a vague promise or a long-term plan, but with a firm, immediate timeline. By early 2026, Burkina Faso will be equipped with next-generation research infrastructure. Not upgraded labs, not refurbished spaces. He meant state-of-the-art scientific environments, the real thing, the kind of facilities young Africans normally have to fly thousands of kilometers to access. It took a moment for the room to absorb it, because this wasn't just an announcement. It was a redirection of destiny. For decades, African students with big ideas had only two options: shrink those ideas to fit their environment, or leave home to chase the tools they needed. But Traoré was flipping the script. The tools would now come here. The ideas could stay. And the scientists, the ones the continent kept losing, could finally build futures without the heartbreak of departure. Some of the equipment mentioned sounded almost unreal for a landlocked Sahelian country. High-performance computing clusters capable of training advanced AI models. Robotics-grade machinery for drone engineering and automation research. Biotech instruments that could support vaccine studies, disease modeling, and agricultural innovation. Cybersecurity labs that could help build digital defense systems strong enough to protect national data. These weren't symbolic purchases. These were the bones of a technological future, and the youth felt it instantly. You could see it in their faces, a kind of relief mixed with hunger. Because when a country finally provides a place where your ideas can breathe, something changes inside you. Suddenly your dreams don't sound unreasonable. Your ambitions don't feel oversized. You stop thinking about survival and start thinking about invention. You stop imagining where else you could go and start imagining what you could build here. The labs weren't just physical spaces. They were a declaration that Burkina Faso intended to become a center of research, not a consumer of other people's breakthroughs. A place where African problems are solved with African intelligence. A place where students not only learn, they innovate, they experiment, they fail safely, they restart fearlessly, they grow boldly. And perhaps the most powerful part of this entire plan was the timing. Traoré wasn't talking about the far future. He wasn't saying someday. He was saying months from now, early 2026. That's practically tomorrow. It signaled a leader who wasn't dreaming at a distance, but steering at full speed. But with all this ambition, new energy, new tools, and a rising regional alliance, one final question began forming in the minds of everyone watching. What will all of this mean for Burkina Faso's identity, its future, and its place in Africa's digital transformation? When you step back from the noise, the excitement, the demos, the youth competitions, the cross-border collaborations, you start to see Digital Week 2025 for what it truly was: a pivot, a quiet turning of the national steering wheel. A moment when Burkina Faso, without raising its voice, shifted direction and didn't bother asking for permission. The country didn't just host an event, it declared a narrative, a new one. And the world will eventually have to catch up to it. For decades, Africa has been talked about as if it is always catching up in education, catching up in innovation, catching up on technology. Digital Week 2025 flipped that idea upside down, because nothing about what happened in Ouagadougou felt like catching up. It felt like starting early, ahead, like a country deciding it would no longer play on someone else's timeline, it would build its own. And that felt radical, beautifully radical. Burkina Faso, a landlocked Sahelian nation that outsiders often underestimate, was suddenly speaking the language of technological leadership, not technological dependency. And it wasn't doing it with borrowed experts or imported dreams. It was doing it through its youth, its inventors, its own growing ecosystem. That shift in self-perception alone is powerful. It's the kind of thing that rewires a generation's confidence. You could see that confidence everywhere during the event. In this way, young engineers explained their prototypes without lowering their voices. In this way, students argued passionately about algorithms as if the entire future depended on getting the details right. In this way, Malian, Nigerian, and Ghanaian innovators sat side by side exchanging ideas with a sense of equals, not guests. It felt like a community that finally recognized its own value and refused to hide it. For Traoré, this wasn't about shiny technology. It wasn't about impressing foreigners. It wasn't about awards or headlines. It was about sovereignty, real sovereignty. The kind that goes deeper than politics. The kind built from the inside out, through knowledge, skill, innovation, and control over digital tools. Because a country that controls its data, its systems, its research, and its digital infrastructure is a country that cannot be easily manipulated, dictated to, or sidelined. And that's why Digital Week 2025 mattered so much. It wasn't simply an event. It was a reset button for national identity. Burkina Faso stopped presenting itself as a country with potential and started presenting itself as a country with a plan. It stepped into the digital space with intention, with structure, with evidence, and above all, with confidence. Years from now, people will look back and see this week as the beginning of a new chapter. The moment when Burkina Faso stopped being seen as a country defined by its challenges and started being recognized for the solutions it was building. The moment when young Africans realized their ideas didn't have to wait until they left the continent. The moment when the Sahel found its digital voice. And that leaves us with one final question, the one that no event, no leader, no innovation can answer alone. Now that Burkina Faso has stepped into this new digital destiny, what extraordinary things will its young generation choose to build next? Let us know in the comment section. Is the youth ready to own the future? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.